The film begins with the appearance of a detective named 𝐂𝐐𝐤, and it looks like he doesn't seem enthusiastic about his way of life. He walks around the house and watches CCTV footage of the robbery. The scene then shifts to Dr. Bruno, who is depicted relishing a tranquil breakfast with his family. His family comprises his wife and their young daughter, Jasmine. Jasmine brims with excitement about her impending birthday. She asked her father to accompany her to school. Her intention is to personally extend an invitation to her classmates to attend her birthday festivities. However, Dr. Bruno was just home from his shift, due to which he is tired and has to take rest, so he gently turns down her request. As a result, Jasmine goes to school alone by herself. After she left, Sylvie asks Bruno to spend some time together in the bedroom, and they head there. Following their time together, Bruno goes downstairs and has a beer, while he opens his laptop and immerses himself in his work. Shortly after, a friend of Jasmine's makes an appearance at Bruno's residence bearing Jasmine's homework book. He informs Bruno that Jasmine was noticeably absent from school that day, and that he is here to give her her text. Bruno is now confused and uncertain about the whereabouts of his daughter. He calls out to her in the house looking if she's home, but he gets no response. He shortly informs Sylvie about the matter, and they soon report their daughter missing. The police come over to their house to investigate the matter. Upon providing the police with a detailed description of Jasmine, Bruno joins them in a frantic search for his daughter along her usual route to school. Their worst fears are confirmed when they stumble upon the lifeless body of a 5-year-old child in a nearby park. Engulfed by a wave of terror, Bruno finds himself rushing to the scene, only to be confronted with the lifeless body of his cherished daughter, Jasmine. It becomes agonizingly clear that Jasmine had been the victim of a brutal assault and strangulation at the hands of a merciless individual. Her dead body is in a very bad condition. Seeing this, Bruno is unable to bear his grief. On the other hand, the wife Sylvie is impatient to get news about her daughter. The scene then shifts to days later, where the couples are now leading their life in darkness. Bruno is swallowed by a deep sense of regret and sorrow, blaming himself for not having accompanied his daughter to school on that ill-fated day. Both parents are submerged in a sea of grief, their lives grinding to a halt as they mourn the tragic loss of their child. They barely communicate or spend time together as they are not able to bear the shock. One seemingly ordinary morning, their somber routine is abruptly interrupted by a call from the detective 𝐂𝐤𝐿. He informs them that Jasmine's murderer has been apprehended. The evidence leading to the arrest was the matching DNA from the sperm found on Jasmine. The perpetrator is identified as Anthony. At night while they were watching the news, it shows the murder of Jasmine being taken to the jail. Anthony was immediately arrested and given a sentence for murder and assault with the threat of 25 years in prison. However, Anthony appears to be remarkably unperturbed and unaffected by his circumstances. Bruno and Sylvie are further saddened because the border has been shifted. The punishment he receives is much less than the exploitation and death of his daughter, but Bruno is not one to sit idly by. He wants to take revenge for all this himself. The next morning, Bruno prepares to leave for the hospital where he is employed. He bids his wife Sylvie a brief farewell, expressing his intention to step out for a while. However, the prospect of being left alone in the house sends Sylvie spiraling into a state of despair, her heart shattering as Bruno departs. In an unexpected turn of events, Bruno, instead of proceeding to his usual workplace at the hospital, deviates from his regular route and heads to his secluded cabin nestled deep within the forest, clearing out the debris to make way for a warehouse. It is in this secluded location that he meticulously begins to formulate a plan to kidnap Anthony, who is scheduled to be presented in court in the near future. Later on, to ensure the success of his plan, Bruno recruits the assistance of certain individuals, promising them a substantial reward in return for their help, incapacitating the police officers assigned to escort Anthony to court. Finally, with the negotiations successfully concluded, the day of the court presentation arrives, and the police were to transport the prisoner. They pick Anthony up and start taking him to court for trial. Bruno discreetly follows the police vehicle from a safe distance where his men have already injected the officers with anesthetic. As the anesthetic takes effect, the police officers succumb to a deep sleep due to the anesthetic, when the car begins to sway from side to side. Soon after, it stopped at the roadside. Seizing this opportunity, Bruno approaches the vehicle and removes the driver from his seat. He then goes to the prisoner safe and knocks Anthony unconscious. Bruno swiftly takes control of the vehicle and drives it to his cabin. Shortly after, the police arrive to find Bruno's car at the roadside and find his ID there. 𝐂𝐿 was there inspecting the incident, so he immediately realizes who has done such a thing. So he shortly goes to Dr. Bruno's house and finds Sylvie there. He asks what the couples are planning, but she informs she has known nothing about Bruno's plans. Upon arriving at the predetermined location, Bruno immediately springs into action. He swiftly positions Anthony on a desk and administers additional medication to him. Bruno then confronts Anthony directly, securing him within a house to prevent any possibility of escape. Bruno's plan is to subject Anthony to a gradual process of torture over the course of 7 days, culminating on his daughter's birthday. After executing his plan and ending Anthony's life, Bruno intends to surrender himself to the authorities. On the first day of this grim timeline, Bruno inflicts pain on Anthony by striking his leg with a hammer until it breaks, but the torment doesn't end there. Once Anthony's leg is broken, Bruno forces him to stand, his neck bound in such a way that if he were to collapse, he would suffocate. Meanwhile, on the second day, as detectives continue their frantic search for Bruno's location, they scour various potential hideouts, including hotels and other accommodations, but their efforts yield no results. In contrast, Bruno is back at the house, feeding raw meat to Anthony. Despite his repulsion, Anthony's hunger compels him to consume the meat. During this time, Detective 𝐂𝐿 is shown reflecting on a past incident. He shares a similar experience with Bruno, having lost his wife to a fatal shooting. 𝐂𝐿 once harbored a desire for revenge, but he realized that vengeance would not bring his beloved wife back from the dead. As a result, he entrusted the investigation of his wife's murder to the proper authorities. Bruno then makes contact with his wife, informing her of his intention to kill Anthony within the next 7 days and then turn himself into the police. His wife Sylvie pleads with Bruno to return home immediately, but Bruno refuses. Unbeknownst to them, their conversation is being monitored by the police, as Sylvie's phone had been previously tapped. Upon hearing Bruno's plan, Detective 𝐂𝐿 vows to intervene before Bruno can carry out his plan. However, despite their best efforts, the detectives and other officers are unable to locate Bruno at that time, prompting them to explore other methods to find him. On the third day of this harrowing ordeal, Bruno resumed his torture of Anthony. This time, he used a chain to inflict pain on Anthony's body until Anthony could no longer bear the agony and lost consciousness. Meanwhile, the detectives were still tirelessly questioning Bruno's colleagues in an attempt to ascertain his location, but their efforts remained fruitless. Eventually, the detectives convened to discuss and speculate on Bruno's possible whereabouts. Initially, they had assumed that Bruno was carrying out his grim plan in a hotel. However, they soon realized that if this were the case, the hotel would undoubtedly have reported it. Therefore, they hypothesized that Bruno might have retreated to a secluded spot in the midst of a forest. The narrative then shifts to the fourth day, where Bruno's torture of Anthony escalates in severity. Bruno conducts a brutal examination of Anthony's abdomen with the intention of inflicting internal injuries. Concurrently, the detectives persist in their efforts to trace Bruno's location by investigating nearby accommodations. On the fifth day, Bruno suddenly begins to suffocate Anthony by obstructing his nose. However, he soon realizes that he is not ready to kill Anthony. At this point, Anthony confesses his wrongdoings. He admits to having harmed 3 other minors besides Jasmine, specifically Marion, Lori, and Carlotte. Upon hearing this, Bruno immediately contacts the police to inform the victims' families that their children were killed by Anthony. During Bruno's conversation with the police, they managed to trace his location. Without wasting any time, the police immediately set out to apprehend Bruno at his current location. Upon reaching the specified location, the law enforcement officers were met with an unexpected sight. All they found were a laptop and a handful of other electronic devices. It soon became clear that this was part of a scheme orchestrated by Bruno, who had enlisted the help of others to set up a decoy network. Feeling duped by this elaborate ruse, the officers hastily retreated to their headquarters. Meanwhile, Bruno was relentless in his pursuit of justice. He took a drastic step to ensure that Anthony would never again be able to exploit children. He surgically removed Anthony's genitals. As the 6th day dawned, the repercussions of Anthony's actions began to permeate the media. Reporters started to pose probing questions to the parents of the victims. While the parents of 2 victims expressed their approval of Bruno's actions towards Anthony, one woman voiced her disapproval. Upon hearing the woman's dissent, Bruno acted impulsively. He kidnapped the woman and brought her face to face with Anthony, the very man who had taken her child's life. Bruno then instructed the woman to torture Anthony. However, the woman refused, stating that seeking revenge would not restore the innocence of her deceased child. Taken aback by the woman's words, Bruno reacted violently. He struck the woman until she lost consciousness. He then left the woman in a secluded spot, feeling conflicted about whether or not to proceed with his plan to kill Anthony. Bruno was left in a state of confusion, unsure of his next course of action after hearing Anthony's confession. The 7th day marked the arrival of the parents and the culmination of Bruno's plan to murder Anthony. Bruno, who was situated deep within the forest, was spotted by a patrolling police officer who noticed a car that was identified as Bruno's. This prompted the police to immediately alert the detectives and other officers to converge on the crime scene. Upon their arrival, the officers embarked on an immediate search of the forest in an attempt to locate Bruno. However, Bruno, who had been contemplating the words of the parents, experienced a change of heart. He decided not to kill Anthony and instead chose to set him free. Bruno then revealed to Anthony that it was his daughter's birthday. Shortly thereafter, the officers were successful in pinpointing Bruno's location. Bruno promptly surrendered himself to the police, leaving Anthony alive. As Bruno was being taken into custody, a journalist posed a question to him, asking if he believed that seeking revenge was a form of justice. Bruno responded in the negative. Then the journalist asked another question if he regrets his actions, but Bruno answered again, no. In the concluding scene, we see Bruno being taken away into a cop car, marking the end of this harrowing tale. Did this story spook you out? Let us know in the comments below. For more horror movie recaps, subscribe to our channel, and we will see you in the next one. Fear awaits you.